What happens when one of radio's most notorious shock jocks decides to call out Hollywood royalty on live television? Well, buckle up, because what you're about to witness is absolutely explosive. Meghan Markle thought she was walking into a friendly chat on The View, but Howard Stern had other plans. And let me tell you, what unfolded next will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about celebrity accountability. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of this. The studio lights were blazing as The View's familiar theme music faded out. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center of the iconic table flanked by Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Sononi host, and Alyssa Farah Griffin. But today was different. Today they had a special guest co-host who was about to shake things up in ways nobody could have predicted. Welcome back to The View, Whoopi announced with her signature growly voice. We're joined today by the one and only Howard Stern, who's here to discuss his latest projects and, well, probably stir up some trouble, as usual. Howard leaned into his microphone with that familiar smirk. Whoopi, you know me too well. I'm here to ask the questions everyone else is too polite to ask. The audience chuckled nervously. They had no idea what was coming. And speaking of asking tough questions, Joy Behar chimed in. We have a very special guest joining us in our next segment. Meghan Markle will be here to discuss her latest charitable endeavors. Sarah Haynes nodded enthusiastically. I'm really looking forward to hearing about her work with women's empowerment initiatives. Howard's eyebrows raised slightly. Oh, this should be interesting. Sononi host shot him a warning look. Howard, please tell me you're going to behave yourself. Define behave, Howard replied with a grin that made everyone at the table slightly uncomfortable. As the commercial break ended, Meghan Markle walked onto the set with her practiced smile, waving to the audience. She was dressed impeccably in a cream-colored blazer, her hair perfectly styled, every inch the polished public figure she'd become. Meghan, welcome to The View, Whoopi said warmly as Meghan took her seat. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for having me, Meghan replied, her voice smooth and media-trained. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. The pleasantries continued for a few minutes as the panel asked softball questions about her recent projects. Meghan spoke eloquently about female empowerment, social justice, and her various initiatives. Everything was going exactly as her publicist had planned. That is, until Howard decided to speak up. Meghan, can I ask you something? Howard interrupted, his tone casual but with an edge that made everyone perk up. Of course, Howard, Meghan replied, though her smile faltered slightly. I've been listening to you talk about empowerment and authenticity, and I have to say, I'm a bit confused. Howard leaned forward, his piercing gaze fixed on her. How do you reconcile preaching about authenticity when you've essentially built your entire public persona on complaining about a family that made you famous? The studio fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Meghan's mouth opened slightly, clearly caught off guard. I'm sorry. What exactly are you referring to? Come on, Meghan, Howard continued, his voice gaining momentum. You've made a career out of playing the victim card while simultaneously cashing in on the very institution you claim oppressed you. That seems pretty inauthentic to me. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to intervene. Howard, maybe we should focus on Meghan's current work. And no, Howard held up his hand. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone wants to handle her with kid gloves. But why? She's a public figure making public statements. She should be able to defend them. Meghan's composure was starting to crack. Howard, I think you're mischaracterizing my experiences in my work. Am I? Howard shot back. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've turned personal family drama into a multi-million-dollar media empire. You've done exclusive interviews, Netflix deals, podcasts, all centered around how badly you were treated. But here's what I don't understand. If it was so terrible, why do you keep talking about it? Joy Behar tried to redirect. I think what Howard is trying to say is, I can speak for myself. Joy, Howard interrupted. Meghan, you recently gave an interview where you talked about how the media scrutiny affected your mental health. That's serious stuff, and I have compassion for that. But then you turn around and put yourself in more media situations. You're literally here right now on television talking to more media. Help me understand the logic. Meghan's face was flush. Now, Howard, I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation. Then explain it to me, Howard demanded. Make it simple. Because what it looks like to the average person is that you want all the benefits of being a public figure, the fame, the money, the platform, but none of the scrutiny that comes with it. Sononi host jumped in trying to defend Meghan. Howard, I think that's unfair. Meghan has legitimate grievances about how she was treated by the British press. And Sononi, with all due respect, Howard turned to face her. Every celebrity has issues with the press. That's part of the job, but most of them don't spend years doing victory laps about it. The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators were getting closer, sensing the television gold was being made. Meghan was visibly struggling to maintain her composure, Howard, Meghan said, her voice tight. I think you're being deliberately provocative and missing the point entirely. The point of what? Howard pressed. Your point seems to be that everyone should feel sorry for you because you married into one of the most famous families in the world and then discovered that fame comes with downsides. That's not exactly groundbreaking stuff, Meghan. Sarah Haynes attempted damage control. Maybe we should take a step back and know. Sarah, Howard continued relentlessly. This is important. We live in a culture where people are afraid to ask tough questions of certain people because they might be called names or cancelled. But someone needs to point out when the emperor has no clothes. Meghan's media training was completely failing her now. Are you calling me an emperor without clothes? I'm calling you someone who's built an entire brand on victimhood, while simultaneously profiting from the very system you claim to be fighting against. Howard replied bluntly. The audience was dead silent, hanging on every word. This was unlike anything they'd ever seen on daytime television. Whoopi finally stepped in, sensing the interview was spiraling completely out of control. Howard, I think we need to remember that our guest came here to discuss her charitable work. But Howard wasn't backing down. Whoopi, charitable work is great, but let's be honest about what's really happening here. Meghan, you've positioned yourself as this champion of women's rights and social justice, but your actions tell a different story. Meghan's eyes flashed with anger. What exactly are you implying, Howard? I'm not implying anything, Howard shot back. I'm stating it directly. You've weaponized progressive language to shield yourself from legitimate criticism. Anyone who questions your narrative gets labeled as racist, sexist, or whatever other convenient label you can throw at them. That is absolutely not true, Meghan protested, her voice rising. I have never used those terms to deflect from legitimate criticism. Howard let out a bitter laugh. Come on, Meghan, your husband literally went on television and suggested that concerns about your children's skin color were racist, when multiple royal biographers have confirmed that those conversations never happened the way you described them. Joy Behar looked panicked. Howard, maybe we should focus on the positive aspects of no. Joy. Howard cut her off. This is exactly the problem. We're so afraid of having honest conversations that we let people get away with rewriting history. Meghan, you sat across from Oprah Winfrey and made claims that have been thoroughly debunked by people who were actually there. Meghan was visibly shaking now. Those are my lived experiences. Howard, you don't get to tell me what I experienced. Your lived experiences. Howard leaned back in his chair. Meghan, there's a difference between lived experiences and provable facts. When you claim that you were denied mental health resources, but palace records show that you were offered multiple forms of support that you declined, that's not a lived experience, that's a factual inaccuracy. Sunony host tried to defend Meghan again. Howard, I think you're being incredibly harsh. The royal family has a documented history of problems with how they treat the women who marry into the family. Sunny, you're absolutely right. Howard agreed, surprising everyone. Diana had legitimate grievances. Fergie had legitimate grievances, but their situations were completely different from Meghan's. They were trapped in that system for years. Had their movements controlled, their friendships monitored. Meghan was there for 18 months, and she had an exit strategy the entire time. That's not fair, Alyssa jumped in. Just because her experience was shorter doesn't mean it wasn't valid. Alyssa, I'm not saying her experience wasn't valid, Howard replied. I'm saying her response to that experience has been calculated and manipulative. Look at the timeline. She's doing secret interviews with royal biographers while she's still a working royal. She's already planning her media strategy before she even leaves. Meghan's composure completely cracked. You have no idea what you're talking about, Howard. You weren't there. You don't know what it was like. You're right. I wasn't there, Howard acknowledged. But neither was Oprah. Neither was Gayle King. Neither was any of the journalists you've given exclusive access to. But somehow, their version of events is supposed to be taken as gospel truth. Those journalists did their research. Meghan protested weakly. Research. Howard's voice was incredulous. Meghan, they interviewed you and your friends. That's not research. That's public relations. Real research would involve talking to palace staff, reviewing actual documents, getting multiple perspectives. But you've made sure that anyone who might contradict your narrative gets sued or silenced. Sarah Haynes looked deeply uncomfortable. Howard, I think we're getting into some really sensitive territory here. Sarah, sensitivity is exactly the problem, Howard replied. We've created a culture where certain people are immune from criticism because they've wrapped themselves in the flag of social justice. But real social justice requires honesty and accountability. Meghan was barely holding it together now. Howard, you're attacking me personally, and frankly, I don't understand why. I'm not attacking you personally, Meghan, Howard said, his tone becoming more serious. I'm critiquing your public behavior. There's a difference. You've made yourself a public figure. You've inserted yourself into political conversations. You've made claims about important institutions. That makes you fair game for criticism. But the way you're doing it is cruel. Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. Cruel. Howard's eyebrows shot up. Meghan, do you know what's cruel? Using your platform to destroy people's reputations without giving them a chance to respond. Your father, your sister, various palace staff members. They've all been thrown under the bus in service of your narrative, and they don't have Netflix deals to tell their side of the story. Whoopi tried again to regain control. I think we need to take a commercial break. And no, Whoopi, Meghan interrupted, finding her voice again. I want to respond to this. Howard, you're making assumptions about my motivations that are completely unfair. Then enlighten me, Howard challenged. What are your motivations? Because from the outside, it looks like you've turned family dysfunction into a career. My motivation is to use my platform to help people, Meghan said, trying to regain her composure. Help people do what? Howard pressed. Because it seems like the main thing you've helped people do is feel sorry for you. Where are the concrete results of all this advocacy work you talk about? Joy Behar attempted to throw Meghan a lifeline. Meghan has done a lot of work with various organizations. And Joy, name one specific measurable outcome, Howard interrupted. One concrete thing that's actually changed because of Meghan's advocacy. Not photo ops, not press releases, not awareness campaigns, actual results. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Meghan opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. That's what I thought, Howard said quietly. You've mastered the language of activism without actually doing the work. You figured out that you can generate endless content by talking about problems without ever having to solve them. That's not true, Meghan finally managed. I've worked with numerous organizations on important issues. Working with organizations isn't the same as achieving results, Howard pointed out. Anyone can show up for photo opportunities and give speeches, but what have you actually accomplished? What specific policies have changed? What measurable impact have you had on the issues you claim to care about? Sunany Austin looked desperately at the producers. Maybe we should move on to our next segment. Why? Howard asked. Because I'm asking questions that don't have good answers. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We've created a culture where certain people are protected from having to defend their record because they've positioned themselves as untouchable. Meghan was now visibly crying. Howard, you're being incredibly unfair and hurtful. Meghan, I'm being direct. Howard replied, his tone softening slightly, but remaining firm. And if that feels unfair to you, maybe that's because you're not used to being held accountable for your public statements and actions. The tears streaming down Meghan's face only seemed to fuel Howard's determination to press his point. Meghan, the tears are exactly what I'm talking about. Every time someone asks you a difficult question, you either cry, claim victimhood, or accuse them of having ulterior motives. I'm crying because you're being needlessly cruel. Meghan sobbed, I came here to discuss my charitable work, not to be ambushed and attacked. Ambushed. Howard's voice rose. Meghan, these are basic questions that any public figure should be able to answer. If asking you to defend your public statements feels like an ambush, maybe that says something about the strength of your positions. Alyssa Farah Griffin finally found her voice. Howard, regardless of how you feel about Meghan's work, making a guest cry on television isn't exactly professional. Alyssa Professional would be doing actual journalism instead of serving up softball questions to celebrities. Howard fired back. When was the last time anyone on this show asked a guest a challenging follow-up question? You're so concerned with being nice that you've forgotten how to be honest. Whoopi's patience was wearing thin. Howard, you're a guest on our show, and you're way out of line. Out of line for what, Whoopi? For treating Meghan like any other public figure, instead of like some fragile flower who can't handle basic scrutiny. Howard turned back to Meghan. You want to be taken seriously as an advocate and a public intellectual, then act like one. Stop hiding behind tears every time someone challenges you. Meghan wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Howard, I don't hide behind anything. I stand by everything I've said and done. Really? Howard leaned forward. So, you stand by the claim that you knew nothing about the royal family before you married Harry, even though there are social media posts of you talking about Princess Diana and following royal news for years before you met him. That's taken out of context, Meghan protested weakly. Taken out of context. Howard laughed harshly. Meghan, there are literally Instagram posts from your old account where you're discussing royal gossip and posting pictures of Diana, but you told Oprah you had no idea what you were getting into. Which version is true? Joy Behar was getting desperate. Howard, I think we've covered this topic enough. No, Joy, we haven't. Howard insisted because this goes to the heart of credibility. If Meghan is willing to lie about something as basic as her prior knowledge of the royal family, why should we believe anything else? She says. Sunony host stood up. Okay, that's enough. Howard, you're calling our guest a liar on live television. I'm not calling her anything, Sunny, Howard replied calmly. I'm pointing out factual inconsistencies in her public statements. If that makes her a liar, that's her problem, not mine. Meghan's voice was barely above a whisper. I've always been truthful about my experiences. Have you? Howard Press. Because the palace staff who were there tell a very different story. The journalists who covered you before you were famous tell a very different story. Your own family tells a very different story. Are they all lying, or are you? My family has their own agenda, Meghan said defensively, and you don't. Howard shot back. Meghan, you've made millions of dollars telling your version of events. If anyone has an agenda here, it's you. Sarah Haynes was practically pleading. Now, can we please change the subject? Our viewers tuned in to hear about positive things. Sarah, this is positive, Howard insisted. Holding public figures accountable for their statements is positive. Demanding honesty from people who have platforms is positive. What's negative is pretending that certain people are above criticism because they've mastered the art of victimhood. Meghan suddenly found her fighting spirit. You know what, Howard? You're right. I do have a platform, and I'm going to use it. But I'm going to use it to help people, not to tear them down like you do. Help people. Howard's voice was incredulous. Meghan, your idea of helping people is convincing them that they're victims. That's not help. That's psychological poison. You're teaching people that the solution to their problems is to blame everyone else and cash in on their grievances. That is not what I do, Meghan protested angrily. Isn't it, Howard? Challenged. Name one piece of content you produce that doesn't center around how badly you've been treated. One interview, one podcast episode, one article that isn't fundamentally about your victimization. The silence stretched on as Meghan struggled to come up with an answer. That's what I thought, Howard said quietly. Your entire brand is built on grievance, and you've convinced yourself that it's activism. Whoopi finally slammed her hand on the table. That's it, we're going to commercial. No, Whoopi, Meghan said, surprising everyone. I want to finish this. She turned to Howard with fire in her eyes. You think you know me, but you don't. You think you understand my motivations, but you don't. You're just another shock jock, trying to stay relevant by attacking someone who actually tries to make a difference. Howard smiled. There she is. That's the real Meghan Markle. Not the crying victim, not the polished advocate, just someone who gets nasty when they're challenged. Thank you for finally showing us who you really are, who I really am. Meghan's voice was shaking with rage. I'm someone who has overcome incredible obstacles to build a platform for positive change. Incredible obstacles. Howard laughed. Meghan, you married a prince. That's not overcoming obstacles. That's winning the lottery. And instead of being grateful for the opportunities they gave you, you've spent years complaining about how hard it was. You have no idea what it was like, Meghan said through gritted teeth. You're right. I don't, Howard agreed. But I know what it looks like from the outside, and what it looks like is someone who's never satisfied, who always needs to be the center of attention, and who's turned personal drama into a career. The audience was completely silent, transfixed by this unprecedented television moment. Nothing like this had ever happened on daytime TV. I think, Meghan said, standing up slowly, that this interview is over. Sit down, Meghan, Howard said calmly. You wanted to use your platform to help people. Help them by showing them how to handle criticism with grace, instead of running away when things get uncomfortable. Meghan paused halfway to standing, clearly torn between her desire to escape and her need to have the last word. Howard's right, she said, finally sitting back down. I should handle this with grace. So, let me say this clearly and calmly. You are a bitter, cruel man who tears people down for entertainment, and the fact that you're doing it to someone who's trying to make the world better says everything about who you are. Howard nodded appreciatively. Now, we're having an honest conversation. Yes, I am cruel sometimes. I tear people down when I think they deserve it, but at least I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be saving the world while I'm doing it. And that, Meghan said with a sad smile, is the difference between us. The show finally cut to commercial as both Howard and Meghan stared at each other across the table. The rest of the panel sitting in stunned silence. There you have it, folks, one of the most brutal takedowns in television history, and Meghan Markle walked right into it. Howard Stern proved once again why he's the master of asking the questions everyone else is afraid to ask. What did you think of this confrontation? Was Howard too harsh? Or was this exactly the kind of accountability that public figures need? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible moments like this.